Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Jill Clifford-Barata. I have a position on the board at the National Association of Women Artists, and I chair the exhibitions committee. I'd like to welcome you here this evening to our Art of Transformation panel discussion. I'm going to just say that NAWA, as we call the National Association of Women Artists, is, how old are we? 125 years old. 126 this year. And as Susan likes to say, we're not that old, but we feel it sometimes. This organization was founded to help promote women artists. We have our own particular obstacles in the world, and we need all the boosts that we can get. So we have a very interesting topic, and I'd like to turn over the panel discussion to Susan Hammond, who's going to moderate. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Susan Hammond. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Women Artists. As Jill said, we've been in business for 126 years. In 1889, 5 women gathered in a New York City studio and formed what is now National Association of Women Artists, but it was the Women's Art Club. And the reason it was founded is still kind of what's going on today, because women still don't have the representation they need in galleries and museums. And we will continue to be in business as long as that's our goal. Our purpose is to promote women with exhibitions, education, panel discussions, events and presentations, and we're archived in about 15 places throughout the country. So if you're a member of NAWA, all of your work is archived in these places. So enough about me. I'm going to pass the mic down, and before we get started on the questions, I'd like each panelist to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Madeline Zuloff, and I am a product of this college. I graduated here in 1976 in fine arts. And I am, I don't know if it's on, is it? Yeah. Okay. Is that better? Yeah. All right, try to sit a little closer. I am a product of this institution. I graduated here in 1976 with a major in fine arts, and went on to Montclair State and got my degree in fine arts, but with a main focus in photography. So it's really an honor to be back here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this show and this panel with distinguished artists.
Hi, I'm Andrea Kelly, and I teach in the visual art department. I teach drawing and design sometimes as well. And this semester I'm teaching drawing too, and figure drawing. And I've been here 10 years already. It's hard to believe, and it's really a lot of fun working here. I enjoy it a lot. We get really fine students and a great faculty. So I appreciate my position here.
I think I have. You have them. Okay. Hi, I'm Leah Tomeno. Actually, I'm a product of Randolph Township. I went to elementary school here and high school here, and then I went off to college, got my Master's of Art, and I'm just so happy. I always wanted to teach here because I live right around the corner, so I couldn't be more thrilled than to be here at the County College of Morris. And I teach two-dimensional design and three-dimensional design.
Thank you. I'm Clay Allen. I'm chair of the Visual Arts Department here at County College of Morris. And I want to welcome everyone to the panel and to this exhibition. We're very pleased at County College to host the National Association of Women Artists for this exhibition in our new gallery. So welcome to everyone, and I'm sometimes an artist as well.
I'd like to mention that Leah and Andrea are both members of the National Association of Women Artists and Madeline Zuloff, and we have about over 800 members cross-country, a chapter in Florida and a chapter in Massachusetts, so we're on the move. How we're going to proceed with the panel discussion, I will be asking at least 400 questions in the hour. No, I will be asking a few questions to the panelists. They can respond at their will. They can call out the response. And if you have any questions, maybe address them after each question rather than waiting till the end when you forgot what you're going to say and it gets very confusing. The topic is transformation. And according to the dictionary, to transform means to change in form, appearance, structure, to change in condition, nature, character, to convert, to alter, to change the form of without in general changing the value, to undergo a change in form, appearance, or character. Today, however, we'll be talking about art and the transformation of art in conjunction with the panelists' artwork. So the first question I will be asking is to the panel, what experiences or observations do you feel you are transforming in your artwork or your art practice?
Well, I could start off with that. I feel as though I'm, working and making the temporary permanent. And I take, as a photographer, I look at it that way, and transforming light and patterns and that I see in a subject and making it more from my perspective, because I do like to work in an abstract form or do something that's not just the standard shoot. It's something a little more interesting, or hopefully it's more interesting.
I've been of the long-standing opinion that the job of art is to make people feel. And I read an interesting observation in a book called Speak by a woman named Laurie Halse Anderson. She said, art without emotion is like a chocolate cake without sugar. It makes you gag. And I think that's true. I think we, as artists, we take our everyday observations and experiences and we channel them into self-expressions that are going to be meaningful for ourselves and others. And I like to use things I have an emotional attachment to already. I use a lot of human subjects, animals, and also nature, because I already have an emotional attraction to them, and I feel that helps me make my art more emotional. Also, by devices we use, light, color, form, our different materials, that is all helpful. Exaggeration, all of those things can heighten the viewer's experience of the art process.
Well, I actually transform brown shopping bags into paintings. I use the process of collage to do that, but I really feel that they're more a painting, that I'm painting with the brown bags. I paint them with acrylic paint first, and then I rip them up and glue them to the canvas, little pieces of paper to the canvas, and so I really feel that I'm just transforming shopping bags into a painting.
Thank you, Leah. Well, perhaps in my discipline of ceramics and by extension sculpture, it might be almost a literal embodiment of this. I think all art practice is anyway. So in ceramics, you start with something that is pretty formless, and you're transforming it right away. As soon as you touch the clay, it's already indelibly marked with your fingerprint, excuse me. And then there's the transformations that occur in the kiln with the firing, which you don't have direct control of. So it's a fascinating process, and something that I was always very keen on experiencing. So you never really know what's going to come out of the kiln. It's all a little bit like Christmas. You open it up, everything has been transformed for something that's dull and matte to something that's shiny and colorful. So it's exciting.
Any questions from anybody? Okay, we're going to move on. What are the ways you feel that making art, even though you're talking about your process as we go along, what are the ways you feel that making art transforms you as an artist, or as a woman artist, or as an artist?
Well, for me, I would say being more observant, being more conscious about the ordinary, because I usually use the ordinary in my photography, and my forms are, very nature, in nature, fruit and flowers or scenic type of images, and it takes bringing the present, being present into being, as opposed to being deliberate, being present and using your intuition as opposed to being very deliberate and direct with just an interpretation.
For me, I feel like sometimes I'm kind of like the master of my own little universe, and I can just follow my own rules. I can flip ideas around, try different things. It's fun. And I can be messy, and in normal life you really can't do that. So I enjoy that, and I usually get so lost in the process that sometimes you lose track of time. You don't even really understand time, and you really know you're in the right place when that transformation occurs. I think most of us can relate to that. Sometimes I'll go back and look at something I made, and I'll almost have no idea how that happened, or I really don't have a conscious remembrance of it. So that's a real transformation as well. Also, I think being an artist teaches you important lessons about life. It makes you tougher, because art is hard. It's messy. Everything's heavy. It's big. You have to be strong in a lot of ways to face the rejection we face lots of times. So I think it's taught me a lot. And meeting deadlines, being, people think of artists as flaky and all of that, but really people don't want to work with you if you're like that. So I think it also helps us to manage our own time and scheduling, and that's a little hard for me, but it's something I really worked on. So I think it's helped me in a lot of ways.
I would have to definitely agree with both Andrea and Madeline. When I'm making my art, I'm mentally in another world, a world all of my own. Normally, this day-to-day world, we're so busy and organized and on top of everything, and then when I go to my studio, I'm in my own little world for hours, all by myself. And so it transforms me, it calms me down physically and emotionally.
Kathleen? Okay. For the panel.
No, I was just waiting.
Oh, okay. I thought you had a very, very compelling question there. But if you do have a question, just absolutely.
You have a question?
I'm going to agree with the other panelists here tonight. I think in some respects, many of us are drawn to art and art making as a form of therapy. It provides an awful lot of comfort, and you learn discipline. You sometimes have moments of peace from these days which are increasingly busy and hectic and that sort of thing. Andrea referred to, that transformation where you lose track of time. It's a common observation, when you're shifting from the left brain to the right brain, that focus it's a different state of mind, literally. So that will often happen. but then there's a dialogue between the two. So you've got your deliberate aspect of what you intend initially to set out to do, and then as the material reacts to what you're trying to achieve, there's a feedback loop in that, in an individual work and then also over time in a body of work. So you're making adjustments constantly, but then intuitively you're involved with it as well. And I guess for me, what happens is it's that modernist line where the more you see, the more you see. So that's probably been the most profound thing for me. So even art historical images that I'm familiar with or artists that I'm familiar with. Hi. Come on in. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, okay. Go ahead.
One of the artists, the woman in black, have made the statement that if art doesn't evoke emotion, then it's, like chocolate cake without sugar. And I'm wondering, for you, when you are creating art, are you coming to emotion? And if so, what emotions do you normally come from when you're doing art?
Could you just repeat the question too, folks, so we could catch on?
Oh, she asked, where am I coming from as far as emotion when I'm creating my art? I did mention, by starting with subjects that I am emotionally driven by, the human form, nature, animals. I do a lot of those I do a lot of horse imagery, and those things already evoke an emotional response in me. And then I make an effort to be expressive in my work, to express that not by copying, because I don't think we should be copiers of our subjects. I think we should be designers, and we should be, putting all of our energy into making our work expressive and be able to transfer that to our viewers. Good?
Okay.
Was that?
Yeah, one of the things I was wondering was sometimes people say they come from anger, and the artwork is therapeutic because they release that anger into their artwork. And I was just wondering if there's any emotions that normally you work from, not necessarily the subject matter, but from inside yourself.
Me personally, I don't really work from anger. I would say I'm looking more to bring peace across. I feel peaceful, in my work, and maybe I think that my work kind of instills more of a feeling of joy in people than anger, personally. I don't know about what you guys think. Anybody have anger issues?
That was a long time ago.
Another question?
Sometimes fear, but not anger.
In your transforming of whatever process you're using, do you ever walk away from it because you're not getting the result you want and then go back to it another day and have a fresh look and go in a different direction?
Anybody?
Who is that addressed to?
Anybody?
Well, I could say for myself, I do have to walk away from it at times. I think I like to stay with it as long as I'm not frustrated. If it gets to the point where I know that my abilities are tense and not relaxed in doing that work, that product at the time, that experience doesn't hold. And I feel like I need a break. I need to see it again in fresh eyes, or give it a chance to think about it. Maybe come back and look at it several more times, and then, come back to finishing it or continuing with it.
I have a question. I find that the current art milieu is extremely cerebral. Every artist has to submit a mission statement or a purpose, or they have to do all this talking and writing. And I find a lot of times that what they're writing is more interesting than what they're making. And so, I was interested in your emotional kind of thing, but I wish you would all speak to that particular phenomenon that I am experiencing. art being very cerebral. And coming away from the making.
I think that that's just something that we have to do in order to get ourselves out there. It's expected of us. You may not like it,
but you don't find that it impacts what that exchange or that need is impacting your art making?
I keep them totally separate. Totally separate. I work around 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I walk away from it. It takes me a good 10 months to make a piece. I'm not fortunate enough to bang out a picture in one day. My process it takes a very long time. So I walk away. That was another question. I can't remember who asked it. Yeah. I walk away every day from my art and come back to it repeatedly for 4 weeks, a month, 10 months, a year. And then write about it when it's over with, or if I'm applying to something, or applying for a show, or I have to change my artist statement. So, I mean, it's just part of the thing we have to do to present ourselves. I think we just have to get used to it. One thing, I think I had just graduated from undergraduate school, and a fellow artist's mother, who was an artist, told me, I want you to write an artist statement and always update it at least twice a year. And I said, well, what's an artist statement? And she said, well, it's how you feel and what you're working on, what it's about, and always update your artist statement. So at 22, coming out of school, I said, oh, I have to write an artist statement. You know, and then you just keep doing it. You just have to keep doing it.
I have one comment on that. I think that in general, art is more conceptual now than it maybe was generations ago, and that's expected, as Leah mentioned, yes. People want to know, like, what's a little bit about what's behind it. I think for individual artists, that's going to be, I tend to write about a specific piece when I do an artist statement, and I try to pick something in the show that has specific meaning for me, and I'll write about it. I'll write almost like a little story, but that's how I do it. It's a little different than the way other people might do it. And then I kind of collect them. I have a little collection of my statements because they're not really about, in general, about my work. It can be more specific. They're more like specific stories. So I think however you decide to do it is what people want. They want to know about your work and what you're all about, too. And I tell my students that now. I always tell them this. This is what's expected nowadays. It's not just enough to paint a little sunset and hang it up on a wall. They want to know what's driving it.
With photography, I find it very consuming. I can get into it. I don't have to leave it. I could be sick. I know what I want to do, and I've been doing it for a long time. And the power that pushes me is it's very important and very beautiful. And I love what I do, and I can do it all the time, and I'm always doing it. So the business of making a statement, I do that all the time because I am making a statement with all of these. It's easier to say that. It's easier to feel it with photography because it's instant. It's the decisive moment. You know you have it, and it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Right, Mark?
I would say so, except when it gets down to writing, which is kind of my nemesis. I really have to force myself, and I find it intimidating and very
what is
fearful.
What is it?
Well, that process of sitting there and writing and looking at it and thinking about it. I can come up with things, but to me, it doesn't. It might make sense, but I don't think it makes any sense to someone else who I may. I have, my husband who is a poet, so he is very good at critiquing my work, and I have a hard time finding the words sometimes. But I think like Leah said, doing it twice a year, keeping it current. I think if you do the process enough, or do it right after you do a piece of work, like they have, and there is a ritual, you know, then I think you can overcome that. Just make it part of that process. And I think, you know, that I will do that. Yeah.
Do you think that you should have a statement for each body of work that you do, rather than just twice a year? I think a lot of times I see artists show a body of work, and then when they tell me what it's about, I don't get it. If I had a statement for each body, it might help, rather than just a general statement, I've been doing photography for 20 years or whatever. I could be wrong, but that's my take on it. Can we move along now? Do we have more?
I'd like to comment on what you
Sure.
said. I don't think you should have to read a statement to get art.
I agree to that.
You know, I think that everyone should get their own thing out of the artwork. And my experience is that most artwork itself, and yes, of course you have to write stuff because there are business requirements or jury requirements, whatever, but you don't really have to read that. All you have to do is look at it.
Sometimes.
Yeah, well, for me,
Right.
you know, I'll read it afterwards maybe, just
Mhm.
out of curiosity, but I like to just look at the piece.
But I mean, even when you go to major museums, they have the introduction of the work right on the walls, so as you're walking in, and it helps if you're not that perceptive. That's my feeling. Anyway, can we move on? Okay. The next question actually is a two-part question. How do you feel people are transformed by experiencing art? And how do you want people to be transformed by your art?
Well, I feel people have their own personal experience with art. I mean, I think it is a personal experience, and the perspective of what you bring emotionally sometimes in viewing that art, wherever you go, or that type of work. So I think, I don't know how to answer that way, but it's other than that personal feeling. The only thing I can think of is how I get feedback about my work from people and knowing how they perceive it or accept it, or influence. I have a friend who has one of my works in her bedroom that she sees every morning when she wakes up. And I just saw her around the holidays, and she said, you know, and she's had that piece for quite a few years. And she says, you know, when I see that every morning, it transports me back to that place that you captured, because she had been there. And she feels like she is comforted from that experience. Or a person I know, I send out cards, and I make my own cards and mail them out. And I've gotten responses back, but I keep it by my desk because it gives me peace, or it makes me, you know, joyful, or there's something about that image that speaks to them. And that's the only way I can understand that maybe how people are responding to my work, is that feedback. Otherwise,
Well, I think experiencing anything really takes some form of exertion. And I think a lot of people are only armchair travelers when it comes to art. I see that in my students, and it kind of makes me sad when I ask them, well, did you see that show? Did you go to New York? Did you look at, and they just kind of give me a blank look. Often that happens. Maybe one or two might say yes, they have seen it. It's rare. I feel like you've got to turn off the noise and don't go to the museum by yourself. Don't take the headphones. Don't get anybody else's opinion. I really feel that if you do that, that's going to add that texture and that richness that you really need to get in the moment with the art and really look at it. And I know that's how I do it. I like to go by myself. I like to just not listen to anything and really experience the work. And it does transform me when I do that. especially if I'm looking at something I've admired maybe in books for years and it finally comes, like I just saw the Matisse cutouts, and it was phenomenal. Things that I've been admiring for years, I got to see firsthand. I was very happy with it. You know, so I think in order to really experience art, you have to go there and really look at it, not just look at it on the screen. It takes away from a lot of your experience.
Well, I agree with both Andrea and Madeline. I think that people are transformed in different ways if they're sensitive to it. Something might make them feel very, like Andrea's saying, when she finally got to see something that she's only seen on the screen or in books, you get that nice feeling of wow, which I remember getting a few summers ago in Paris in the Monet Museum, looking at the lily pads all around in that big museum where it was just so huge. I just sat there and I couldn't move. You know, I was just struck with the beauty of his work. I was totally transformed. But I don't know about a regular, non-educated person, I wonder, going to look at just a picture on the wall, going to the museum. I think you have to be a little sensitive. You know what I mean? I think you have to be a sensitive individual to be transformed by looking at art, or dance, or theater.
I'm going to start by saying that obviously it's going to affect different people in different ways, and everyone is going to respond differently to different forms of art and what have you. And that's part of the beauty of it, really. There can be a wide range of responses. I might like something, Leah may not like that individual work or that artist for that matter. So that can be valid anyway. So I think for us as artists, in many cases, some early experience like that where you approached something and you saw it and it had this effect on you, and then it's so powerful that you feel like you want to do something similar. So it's definitely part of that communication thing. You know, you're trying to express either an idea or a feeling or whatever it might be, a sensation perhaps, and you're hoping when you put it up on the wall in an exhibition that someone will find something to respond to in that. And for myself, when that happens, that's a great moment. Not just me experiencing somebody else's work, but somebody experiencing my work. And a lot of times that can be a revelation or a surprise. There are certain things that I sometimes do or create that seem kind of normal or obvious to me that other people are just, wow, and I'm like, oh, okay, great, so it's an exciting moment. So you learn something from that too, by the audience or the viewer response. So it's pretty profound, and I guess some of the points were made earlier. It's easy to get distracted by day-to-day things, the noise, electronic noise in particular, because it's a different kind of experience to sit down in front of a painting and stare at it for an hour, for example. It moves you in different ways, is my observation.
Okay. Questions? Okay, we'll move forward. How does your art evolve and become transformed as you work on it? Do you follow a plan, or do you improvise as you go to get to a final product?
Well, as I begin to work on a piece, that may just be a random photograph, okay, that I decide that I wish to work on. I find that when I allow my intuition to take over and I let go, because sometimes when I first start anything, I'm intimidated, it's a little scary, I have to kind of force myself to just really get into it. I don't know what the fear is, but it's like walking through a threshold sometimes to say, I'm committed to do this, and I have to work on this, you know, and once I do that, it's like, it becomes a natural experience. But what I want to say is I see the details or something interesting in those details of it that transforms into something else. So whatever originally was in the image may become something else altogether by cropping in or getting involved with specific detail that I want to embrace and do something to make it more of a center part of that piece. And as a jazz enthusiast, and I listen to jazz when I'm working, I find that improvisation really helps me in that, because the piano jazz or whatever I'm listening to at that time seems to really help me feel more fluid and relaxed, and I just really find that a great pleasure. So I usually, everything I start with, I don't usually have a concrete idea that this is the way it's going to go. I never make it like this is what it's going to be. I let it kind of tell me what it's going to be as I'm working on it, and it just comes about that way.
We have a question.
Could you describe one piece in particular that evolved, just to have us see it visually, and how and why it evolved the way it did?
I do some water reflections, and sometimes I have them quite a wide a view of it. It's light and water and different details in that reflection. And as I look at it, and I go, I don't really, you know, it doesn't do anything for me the way it is, you know, and then I start seeing that the details are more in a certain section of it. So I can go into that and enlarge that portion, and it becomes a whole nother image. And some of the details of that also, with the color and the flattening of the image, it becomes more look like a painting than a photograph to me. Because and depending on what type of paper I print it on and so on, and it comes out that way. Did I answer your question?
That's great,
okay.
Yeah. I'd like to see some of your work.
Okay.
Can't wait to see it.
For me, even if I start with like some sort of a developmental plan, I think magic really happens when I deviate and all the twists and turns that it takes. I think, as Madeline mentioned, you can't take full control. You got to let it lead you, and you have to lead it. I think sometimes if you force things too much, you don't get a good result. I don't know who said it, but you have to kill your little darlings sometimes. And sometimes I'll have something I really want to keep, and it's just not working. And the more I try to make it work, the worse it gets. So you got to kill your little darling sometimes and move on. And I find that if I allow myself to go with the flow like that, I get a much better result. You know, there's a lot of surprises that happen. It depends on, you're working with certain different sizes, or maybe the surface that you're working on, the feeling of it, the colors, how they react to one another. They're all going to play into that. There's a lot of things that take place that you really don't have control over. And I do a lot of scraping and repainting and scraping again. And sometimes I just lay the whole thing down on the floor and pour turpentine over it. scrape it all down. Then I paint over that. So I kind of let things happen, and I eliminate things I don't like and keep things I do. So I think in doing that, like I said, not trying to force it and letting sometimes the piece itself take control. It's a good thing to do for me.
I guess I have to be the black sheep of our family here. I follow a plan to a T. I start with what's farthest away, whatever's farthest in the background. Maybe it's because of the process that I'm using. If it's a landscape, let's just say I start with the sky because that's behind everything, and I work in layers, and I can't have what's farthest behind be on the top layer. So that has to be on the lowest layer for me because it's back. I'm sure Marisol understands with the work that she does. So I use a lot of math in my work. I may grid my work. I know exactly what I'm doing from the second I begin a piece of work, and I don't leave anything to all this fun stuff that they're talking about. Yeah, mine's not magical. It's just really painstakingly hard, and it takes a long time, and it kills me. And it's just...
She loves it.
But I need it. And then when I put the last little bits on the top layer, I know I'm almost there, and then I'm there, and then I'm done. And then I may say, oh, that color doesn't look good back there, and maybe I'll go back somewhere and change a color or something.
We'll be helping to plan your vacation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I was going to start off with, there's a phrase like this, but I couldn't remember it exactly. So it's something like reality is fatal to any plan. As soon as you start action on something, it changes right away. That's been my experience. But having said that, in ceramics, like some other art forms, photography, wet photography, printmaking, it's very process-oriented. So you actually have to, in effect, follow a plan because there's a certain order that you have to do all the steps to achieve the result. And if you do them incorrectly or out of order, it's not likely to work out. So there is an implicit plan to the order of steps in the process. But outside of that, I think in particular ceramics is like that because of that rigidity of some of the technical aspects. As artists, we try to cultivate chance. Little things that you're not really in control of that you know aren't going to make the thing blow up, but will lead perhaps to an interesting result, and using that feedback loop to refine what you're doing. If I do this with this and that, and what will happen? You put it in the kiln, it comes out, and you have your answer, and then you can proceed from there. I don't like that, and then you do something else differently the next time. So that keeps it alive and fun. You come down to the studio, we'll do some work.
Yes.
Can I just ask Lydia a
Sure.
question? Well, so I presume, or you tell us, when you start your first piece, or you sit down for your piece that you've got all planned out, I mean, you've gone through a process to get to that, I'm presuming. Or you tell us what you do to get down to this plan for how you're going to, what piece you're going to build with all the paper bags.
How do I choose?
Yes,
Or-
I mean, there must be a process that you go through to come up with a design idea or something.
Yes, I may have something in the works up here for years.
Yeah, but
And-
once you execute it, you know.
Once I start to execute it, I start with whatever is farthest back in the image, because I have layers, and I want what's closest to the viewer to be pushed out by the viewer, and what's farthest away from the viewer to be behind. So I start with what's behind. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Okay. So like whatever color is back, then I'll paint that color, and then I'll rip it up and apply it to the canvas, and then do whatever's on top of that color. Is that okay? Okay.
I have a question. Because I remember you mentioning to me you did painting a lot in college before you kind of became like a sculptor and such. Did you do the same process when you were painting, like very step by step, or was it different?
I quit painting. There was a mismatch. Went off to art school and thought that to be an artist meant you had to be a painter, which was a kind of a narrow interpretation of what an artist could be. And when I understood that that wasn't a good fit for me, I didn't know what to replace that idea with. So it took a decade maybe to come back to art and find a new way of working. And it turned out to be ceramics, almost by accident. So that's a personal story. It's transformative, I will admit. But no, I couldn't wait to finish a painting. I felt so much anxiety as I was, doing it that I couldn't wait to put the brushes down, and quit. So I figured that was a bad sign.
Any questions? Any other questions? Okay, we're moving on to another question. It's a two-part one. What role does art play in changing or transforming society? And are there any personal thoughts or observations you'd like to share in light of the recent events in Paris at Charlie Hebdo? It's a tough one.
Yeah. Well, I think, definitely art does, firstly, I think it does reflect our society. I really feel that, and it can make an impact on change in the society by, you could do documentaries, film, and on the rigid end, and show us what's going on in the world. It can make people angry and make change by their motives to say, I really don't like that. I really like to see something in our society change. It can work that way. It can be, interpreted as brutal and make people angry. And as we know, what happened in Paris, but I think we all need to keep that freedom alive and to be able to do what we want. And even if we don't like what we see, maybe it's possible that we just don't look at it or don't, but it can make a definite impact.
Well, I'm not a political activist by any means, but I think if you are going to be a political activist with your art, you're going to have to really watch your back, because we live in a very violent society. I think it's up to each and every individual artist to decide how far they want to go with that. But I think as artists, we all have the opportunity to use our art to maybe bring to the fore things we care about in society. I think that's very important, because our work is in the public eye. We can use it as a platform for anything that we care about to make societal changes. For instance, I have a project right now that's in the works. I do a lot of horse imagery. I really love horses. I always have since I was a little tiny kid. And I'm trying to set up, working in conjunction with a horse rescue operation and giving some of the proceeds from any of my horse imagery to a horse rescue operation. So that's something I feel is important to me. and it really fuels my passion for my work when I have something that I care about. And I really feel all artists should give back something if they can.
Well, I would have to agree that we need to have freedom of speech. It's very important for all of us, and that art has transformed society. Art that we look at is what an artist feels, and if it happens to be angry, it happens to be angry. When I was younger, I did a lot of angry, sarcastic work involving all sorts of things, female mutilation, female genital mutilation, and they sold to collectors. I did a lot of very dark work, and I believe that we should have the freedom of expression. And if I was talking to my mother last week about this question when Susan emailed these to us, and my mother said, well, what about the, the Jon Stewart show? You know, he's a liberal making fun of conservatives. So what do you think? Do you think that we should have these shows on TV? What about Tina Fey making fun of Sarah Palin on Saturday Night Live? Right? I mean, isn't that freedom of expression? What are we going to do? What if there are redneck skinheads out there? They're going to go kill everybody who made those television shows? And then what would we say? A lot of people enjoy those shows. I personally don't watch a lot of TV, so, but that's because I'm stuck ripping paper in my studio all by myself. But you know, a lot of people enjoy Saturday Night Live or that show, the Jon Stewart show. So it's important. I think it's important for us.
Well, clearly it's a very challenging question. And it's could be to some artists, depending on the way they practice, an invitation to talk about politics directly. But you can just easily observe that over history, there are moments that have been transformative where somebody's come up with a new way of seeing. I mean, and there's easily a dozen that any of us could think of, including in the audience. So art has always played a role in that. And always will, I believe. Nowadays, in some ways, I think it may be more challenging for an individual artist to create an image deliberately that is going to happen, or make that happen. So it's like, you know, somebody posts something and it goes viral. Well, nobody really knows beforehand what is going to catch on like that. You know, what's going to have that power that's going to make that response in the audience. But there was a phase in early modernism where it seemed like every artist had to write a manifesto. This goes to your earlier question in a way. It seemed like they needed a justification, an intellectual one, for the kind of weird art they were making, you know, cubism or whatever, because those images were pretty challenging for the time. So society responds in different ways. In contemporary practice, I'm a little bit disturbed by overtly offensive artwork and having a practice revolve around that. It just seems to me that you're just poking your finger in the audience's eye all the time, deliberately. And I don't know, this is already going back some years, but a lot of the Sensation Show and the Brooklyn Museum of Art exhibition had aspects like that, and they're very challenging. I mean, it's useful for a conversation in an art history course or something like that. So I don't tell students what to think or anything like that. But sometimes I think that approach has to be questioned, and as Andrea observed, it's like if you're going to overtly offend a political persuasion or whatever, you do have to watch your back. And things have maybe gotten more dangerous, I don't know. Stalin did purge all the constructivist artists in Russia, and there are many stories like that as well. So I don't know. It's an open question. Sometimes it can be a very courageous thing to do, depending on the political climate that you're in. Nazi Germany, another one, and artists were overtly persecuted because of the types of messages that they were bringing to the public. But do we want them to stop doing that? I don't know. It's a very, very tough question. Just observations all the way around.
Well, I have 400 more questions to ask, but I think we're going to wrap this up. I'd like to ask if there's any more questions in the audience, but I'm sure the panelists will be glad to continue the conversation over a glass of wine at the reception. But I would like to thank the panelists, and I just want to just close with the thought. I think there are many artists here in the audience. I think there are some future artists here in the audience. The thing is about passion and having a passion for what you do. And you can see that all the panelists are very involved with their craft, and we're wishing that you do the same. And it's really important to promote women artists as well, until we get to the point where we don't have to do that anymore. But if an artwork did not have an artist's name on it, it would be interesting, because then we wouldn't know what the gender is. It would just be the artwork, and you'd be critiqued, and the value of it would be on the work itself. Anyway, closing thoughts, and now I'm going to turn it over to NAWA's exhibition chair, Jill.
First of all, I'd like to recognize Marie, who came in. She's our president over there, waving. Welcome. I also want to thank the panel and the audience, because I think, after listening to this and having to restrain myself because I just wanted to give a lecture on every single one of these things, that we could probably take each question and have a full evening discussion on every single one of these questions. And I think the points that everybody brought up, and please don't think of yourself as a black sheep. I think it's great to have the variety of processes that we are hearing about, and that's part of what makes our tolerant and diverse society unique and successful in this wonderful country we live in. So with that, I think all that's left to do is invite everybody to remain for the reception if you can, and spend some time really looking at the artwork. It is true that when you're standing in front of an artwork, you see something that you can't see in a reproduction, in a video, on a computer screen. I recently saw some of Gustav Klimt's artwork, and to see how the light bounces off of every stroke is part of the experience. And you can buy, as somebody said the other night, I forget the context now, you can buy almost anything online except an experience. It's not the same as being in real time in real space. And while we all love our technology, that the art experience is transformative, therapeutic, and instructive for all of us, and contributive to our society in ways that we don't even know while we're living sometimes. So thank you again, and let's give the panelists a big hand. And with that, you're all released to have a glass of wine and enjoy the artwork. Thank you.